I'd like to call to order this regular meeting of the Boulder Valley Board of Education for Tuesday, March 8th, 2022. I do apologize for those of you who are tuning in. Our work session ran a little late, so thank you for bearing with us. Laura, would you please call the roll?
Garcia.
Here.
Gephardt.
Here.
Niznik.
Here.
Rajpal.
Here.
Sargent. Here. Sweeney Moran.
Here.
Zis.
Here.
Thank you.
Please join us in the Pledge of Allegiance. I'd like to remind everybody that the mission of the Boulder Valley School District is to create challenging, meaningful, and engaging learning opportunities so that all children thrive and are prepared for successful, civically engaged lives. Good evening, everybody. Thank you for joining us electronically on BV22. We're glad to have you observe and participate in our meetings. At this time, I would accept a motion to approve our agenda for this evening. By Kitty. Second by Nicole. Laura.
Garcia.
Yes.
Gephardt.
Yes.
Niznik.
Yes.
Rajpal.
Yes.
Sargent. Yes. Sweeney Moran.
Yes.
Zis.
Yes.
Motion passes.
Thank you. Tonight we'll begin, as always, with the superintendent's report. Dr. Anderson, good evening.
Thank you, Board President Gephardt, members of the board. Great to see you all this evening. For those in the community, apologize that we are running a little bit late. Have a few updates for you all, board members. Waiting for Randy to pull up the deck or slides. If not, I'll just keep going, and Randy, you catch up. Again, board members, we've been since we've last seen each other, and the public has seen our last public meeting. We've done 5 more teacher roundtables. It's just a reminder to the public. We're going and having conversations with each and every teacher at every school, starting with elementary schools. We'll move on to middle and high schools later on in this semester. No agenda. We provide lunch. Thanks, teachers. Board members join me, and we ask them what's working and how can we do better. We've had some just really great ideas, I think, that have come from these meetings. Just very, very thankful for the conversations and feedback. Every week we take that feedback and present it to our cabinet, so we're never far away from what's happening in schools. And I think that that's really, really important as we make sure we put schools first in our organization. So I want to thank the teachers in schools making the time and having lunch with us, continuing to have those meetings in the next couple of weeks. I want to congratulate our Boulder Tech video production team. So this year, Boulder Tech launched a brand new video production class, and they're already making a mark. We had 3 class projects that were selected for the 2022 Boulder International Film Festival's Teen Short Film Competition. The festival was held last weekend. 2 films were nominated for Best Documentary, and a third was nominated for Best Animation. Board members, as I know that we've been communicating with you all, the academic competition season is now underway. This past week we had several National History Day competitions happening across the district. Once Randy pulls the photos up, or our team are able to pull the photos up, we have some photos of that. The Cordon Farmer Regional Science Fair was held at Centaurus on February 26th. Northern Colorado Canyon Regional Destination Imagination Award Ceremony was held last weekend, and it's just really great to see our students back together, enjoying these challenges in person. I want to thank all the volunteers and staff and the adults in our system to help make these things a huge success. So thanks to everybody for that. Several of our BVSD students also placed in the Colorado Association for Bilingual Education Proud to be Bilingual essay contest. This is a real point of pride for the district. In elementary, first place, Emiliano de la Torre from Escuela Pioneer, Bilingual Pioneer in Lafayette. In third place, Ann Scarborough from Uni Hill in Boulder. In middle school, there was a tie for third place for Julia Anavisca Rubio from Casey Middle School and Rachel Tilton from Casey Middle School. So congrats to those students and again those adults who made that possible. And finally, board members, I do have one item I'd like to bring to your attention. As we know that all local health orders have been removed, I'd like to recommend to our board that at our next public meeting, which would be April 12th, that we move back to opening up our meetings to the public with both public participation and public viewing, and that we move to a hybrid approach for public comment. We would allow citizens that were in person to comment, and then we would allow those that wanted to join us in a hybrid format to comment. It would require, we would need to make sure that we're adjusting that order based on the technological limitations. It would be really clunky to go in person, then virtual, in person, and virtual. So we feel like that's the right recommendation. We'd post these new policies, how to speak, and everything you'd need to present to be able to speak in person and online, where we post our agendas, and we'd post it on our website. And so that would be starting April 12th. And wanted to present that to the board for you all to ask questions, and as we move forward, feel like that's probably the right time to move in that direction at this point. And that's all I have for my comments this evening.
Thank you, Dr. Anderson. Board members, any questions about the report? Kitty and then Nicole.
Yeah, I just was concerned by your use of the word citizens. We don't want to imply that if you're not a citizen, you can't come and speak. So I just want to be sure.
I apologize. Yes, no, you're
Yeah,
correct.
everybody was clear on that. Community members.
Nicole?
I was just going to request, if we're moving to a hybrid format, is there a way to ask those participating online to have their video feed live so we can see who's communicating with us in that modality as well as who's communicating with us here in the facility?
Technically, yes, but I think since we haven't had that practice in the past, we probably need to think about recommending it as opposed to requiring it, but we can certainly look into that. That would be my guess. So we could, when we post the new kind of being in person, I'm looking at council. I think moving to requiring it might be a step that we can get to maybe eventually, but I think recommending it for right now might be the best way to go. Because I agree with you, it would be really nice to see the people who are Zooming in, just so that, like I say, like the other day, someone stopped me in the grocery store. It'd be really nice to remember that I'd actually met that person, even if it was just on a Zoom call. So, okay, anything else, Nicole? Anyone else? Richard?
I know that we're not going to debate this in terms of recommending and requirement, but I just want to make sure that people understand that there are a lot of laptops out there that don't have cameras. And people have those still, so just so that we're aware.
Anyone else? The question I have, Rob, is, and I know we don't have an answer to it yet, but I think we will by our board meeting, is will there be any kind of like screening like you have to do when you go into a school when people show up to do public participation here? We don't have anybody out front. Usually after 4, I think, is when that person leaves, or 4:30. So I'm just curious if we can at least have that conversation sometime between now and April.
Once we invite the public back into our building, we'll have a building monitor out there, just like we would as we had in the past.
And is it, what do we call it, the Raptor system? Will that be in effect? Do they have to show an ID, or what, do we know?
Yeah, let us work with our team to make sure we get a right process, and we'll share that with the board.
And with the public with time to figure that out too. All right. Any other questions for Dr. Anderson as a result of the report? All right, thank you, Dr. Anderson. I'm excited to start seeing the public back in our meeting. I think a step towards being back as normal as we could many years ago, it feels like now, is a really positive step, and it feels really good. So we'll now proceed to the next item on our agenda, which is public participation. This will be our last uniquely solo Zoom or Google Meets participation. Members of the public who wish to speak at tonight's meeting were asked to sign up prior to noon today by submitting the request to speak during public participation form that can be found on the BVSD website, or by contacting the Board Secretary, Laura Schaefer. Public participants will join and present their comments via Google Meet. The board respects the rights of the public to speak on matters concerning the operation of the schools. We believe that public comments that are critical of district staff, however, often cause unnecessary harm to those employees and to the education of our students. As a result, we prefer that members of the public share any criticisms of employees in writing with the superintendent, who is responsible for supervising all staff and then involving the board as necessary. If you choose instead to address a personnel issue publicly, please understand that the board does not endorse the comments of any speaker and reminds all who speak that they assume the risk of legal action by district employees in the event the affected employees believe that any comments about them violate legal standards. To ensure that our meeting is conducted in an orderly manner, we ask that persons who address the board, 1, confine your comments to matters that are germane to the business of the school district. I think we only have one speaker, so I'm not really going to talk about agenda and non-agenda items. 2, limit your presentation to 2 minutes. If we go over the first hour, which we will not, public comment will continue at the end of the meeting. If you run out of time or you would like to share additional information, you may email the board. We all read our emails, so I encourage people to pursue that as well. Recognize that students often attend or view our meetings. Speakers' remarks, therefore, should be suitable for an audience that includes kindergarten through 12th grade students. I may interrupt, warn, or terminate a participant's statement that is unrelated to the business of the district or inappropriate for K-12 students. This video will be recorded for public viewing in perpetuity. BVSD reserves the right to remove you from the meeting if your video includes material that is inappropriate for the public or BVSD students. You will see a yellow card when you have 30 seconds remaining. When you have 10 seconds, you will see an orange card. Please wrap up your comments at the end of your 2 minutes. A timer will sound and your microphone will be muted. So, Laura, do we have the list of the speaker?
And I believe this individual has not shown up yet. So, okay,
And I believe the second individual decided not to participate.
that is correct.
I'm fine. Andrew, if this person shows up, give us a high sign and we'd be happy to feed that person into the program as it goes forward. So I'll just look for you and throw something at me if I'm not looking at you in the right time. Zooming along. And we will now move to the next item on our agenda, which is board communication. Board members who would like to begin? Lisa?
Yeah, I have a few things. The first one I want to talk about, I spent Sunday morning at the Boulder International Film Festival, which we just referenced, watching the premiere of the movie This Is Not Who We Are at the Boulder High Auditorium. It's a film about racism in Boulder and discusses both the historical and systemic beginnings of racism in Boulder going back into the 1600s, and it also looks at events in Boulder today. Several of our BVSD students, current and former, are featured in the film, speaking about their experiences. And the movie won the People's Choice Awards at this year's film festival. So 2 things. First, I'd love to encourage everyone listening and everyone in this room to watch the film. It's really remarkable. It's available streaming for the next 10 days at the Boulder International Film Festival website. And second, I would like us to talk about how we can make this film accessible to our students and community. I'd love us to find ways to show this movies in our schools, either in classrooms or in assemblies, and offer opportunities and conversations for supporting student engagement around these topics. And I'll add to that I watched the movie a second time on Monday at home with my kindergartner and second grader, and they both got a great deal out of it. So I think given that it's a film that was locally made, that's made about our town, and it's about a topic of, I think, great interest and great importance, I'd like to see if there's a way we can do something with it. Switching gears, Meadowlark was a great visit, and we found out there that the teachers there seem to watch BOE meetings like at a much greater rate than anybody would anticipate, so I think we should give a shout out to any of them who are watching now. But it was a really interesting roundtable. I learned a lot about the challenges facing Meadowlark and East County generally when it comes to enrollment. And it was also a really inspiring roundtable. The way the teachers see their roles and their relationship to one another and their desire to just be fully invested in their project-based learning. It was really inspiring, and I appreciated them welcoming us. And finally, I appreciate the emails and phone calls we've gotten already around bilingual education, and I know we'll be hearing more before our April 26th work session. I know we discussed this briefly, but I want to put on the table also that we're running out of time during our work sessions generally, and I think this should be a big one. So I'm hoping we can look at the hour we have planned for that and look at whether we can stretch that out, start a little earlier, run a little later, but make sure we have a chance to fully discuss.
Thanks, Lisa. Anyone else with board comment? Richard, nothing? I know Stacy doesn't have anything either. Kitty?
Yes, I was at Boulder Universal for the teacher roundtable and at Birch today, and I was so impressed, well, with both of them, but with Boulder Universal, I was so impressed with what they are doing and what they're doing with BU Link. We had teachers talking about working with kids who would ordinarily not participate if they were in person, but who will when they're online. And so just the idea of being able to reach a lot of these students in a different way is such a benefit. And they were also talking about like doing intervention, special intervention with kids, either for enrichment or whatever they need virtually. And so I was just delighted to see how well this is working. And then at Birch today, I was really impressed that the teachers who had issues also had solutions. And they had some really good ideas. So it's been a great experience going around to the schools and hearing what the teachers have to say.
Thanks, Kitty. Anyone else? I just have a couple things. On Friday, I was able to participate in what the Colorado Lawyers Committee is redoing, which is called No Place for Hate, and it's a great program, and I would love to see us do it a little bit more broadly in our district, and I know that they're looking at St. Vrain and other districts, and for those of you who don't know what it is, it's basically taking the Colorado hate crime statute and putting on a trial for middle school and high school students. They said sixth grade's a little young, but we had a group of seventh graders and eighth graders, and the seventh graders were really lucky because they got to have Melissa Hart, who is on the Colorado Supreme Court, present the prosecutorial piece. And my understanding was, I was in the other room, was that she basically got a standing ovation. And I will just say that I was glad I wasn't having to go up against her. But I know Rob came by, and then the students act as jurors. And it's really, really interesting. And then there's facilitators for each of the juries. And I just think it's a really strong lesson, not only in what it's like to be on a jury and to listen to evidence and to try to also, in a very meaningful way, understand what the hate crimes statute is. So to the extent that we can, and it's no cost, it takes a couple hours out of a day, and it's usually brought in by the social studies teacher. And this came into Horizon K-8 because there happened to be a mom who was an attorney who did immigration law and who knew about this program. And so I think this was the first day that they were back in person. So to the extent that we can offer that to some more of our middle schools and high schools. I went to one at Fairview a couple of years ago, and it really is a great program. And like I said, there's no cost to us, and I think it's a really meaningful lesson. And then a couple of quick things. Last night I was watching Channel 9, and Aubrey Ye, am I saying her name right, was on about our musical instrument donation program for families from the fire. So I just wanted to do a shout out to her because I'm looking at the news and I'm like, I know that face. And it was a really nice piece. And so to the extent that people have musical instruments, like I know I found an old saxophone in my basement, to donate, I think this is a good time to do it because this is the time of year when they're actually gathering instruments. And I know there have been some other efforts around by families and others to try to gather instruments for the families in the fire that lost their musical instruments. And then I think it was maybe 10 days ago, was the CASB Legislative Conference, and I think that was well attended, and it was a nice effort, and it is capped off by visiting with your legislators on Friday, and it was just a good way to learn kind of what the issues are, and to learn a different way to becoming engaged with our legislators and with the legislative process. So that's all I have. Thanks. So we are now moving on to our first information item tonight, which is Building for Student Success, the bond final report. I think this will be started off with Rob Price.
All right. Kick it off. All right, good evening, President Gebhardt, members of the board, Dr. Anderson. Tonight I'm joined by John Stanton, our Citizens Bond Oversight Chair. John and I will be presenting our final report for the 2014 bond program. In the 7 years since BVSD voters approved our current bond program measure in November of 14, we have completed 62 projects totaling nearly $658 million. Our total revenue for the program is $677 million, which includes proceeds from the sales of the bond, just over $19 million from other sources such as interest earnings, $900,000 in Excel rebates, grant funding, and contributions from schools and municipalities, among others. Over 7 years, there's a lot of work to be proud of, a lot to celebrate, so that's what we'll be doing tonight. So through the assessment process and the development of the Educational Facilities Master Plan, 3 school buildings, Emerald, Douglas, and Creekside, were identified for replacement because the cost to repair them was significant enough, and it made more sense financially and from a functional perspective to replace them. In similar fashion, the Halcyon School building was in need of significant repair. After evaluating several options with a stakeholder group, the decision was made to replace the building on its current site. Halcyon is a day treatment program that provides students access to education while also providing therapeutic behavior interventions, strategies to students and their families. The new building was intentionally designed for the needs of the program and included elements of a trauma-informed design to create a safe, comfortable space for our students. Meadowlark School is BVSD's first school in Erie and was built to serve enrollment growth in that area. The school serves students in preschool through 8th grade. Enrollment at that school has been robust and is anticipated to surpass capacity in the coming years. We'll talk about that in more detail at our March 15th facility assessment meeting. A significant portion of the bond program was directed at maintenance, upkeep, and major building components such as roofing, windows and doors, HVAC, electrical systems, plumbing systems, replacing worn-out carpet, flooring, ceilings, and provide new lighting and paint. This work has reduced the deferred maintenance needs where equipment materials are past their life cycle from 73% to 6%. That's in terms of square footage, and again, that's something else we'll cover next week. So we have extended the building lives in our district by decades. Through the bond program, BVSD expanded our capacity to provide a strong academic start for students across the district. New kindergarten classrooms and playgrounds were built to accommodate full-day K kindergarten programs. When full-day kindergarten funding became a reality, BVSD was prepared and ready to welcome students to fully equipped learning spaces designed for their needs. We also added and renovated preschool rooms and playgrounds throughout the district to give more children access to high-quality preschool experiences. The construction of several new support facilities has allowed us to make giant steps forward to boost operational efficiency and functionality. The new transportation center, which replaces a decades-old structure that sat out back, was moved to a larger site over here on 63rd Street to reduce the congestion of school bus traffic with other traffic here at this location. At more than twice the size of the old building, the new facility provides a safer environment for our employees and is designed to be more efficient in terms of workflow and energy usage. The new 33,000 square foot Culinary Center located on the district's central campus out back here replaces 3 regional kitchens previously housed at our schools. With significantly more storage and processing space, the new facility is expected to boost efficiency, food safety, food quality, while also supporting the district's fresh food mission. Through the bond program, our community invested in improving student health. Projects at all school levels aim to ensure all BVSD students have access to the benefits of physical activity. Elementary playgrounds were expanded to provide a greater variety of equipment and play options. At the secondary level, students are benefiting from additional synthetic turf fields at our middle schools, new gyms at Platt and Manhattan Middle School, and major renovations to athletic facilities at our high schools. Indoor air quality is better across the district with many new and renovated heating, ventilation, and air conditioning systems and low VOC products and materials. With the new Culinary Center, we'll be able to increase product as demand grows and expand efforts around nutrition education and addressing food insecurity in our community. Student comfort got a boost from the bond program. Audio enhancement systems were installed in all classrooms to help students and teachers hear each other without straining their voices. Air conditioning in all non-mountain schools keeps everyone comfortable during hot weather. Thank you for that. New soft furniture in a variety of styles lets students choose seating that suits them and their learning style. The bond team worked with district special education staff and our special education advisory committee to make sure our facilities were meeting the needs of our students and our staff. Special education rooms in many BVSD schools were renovated in a variety of ways to improve functionality and comfort. The bond program installed play equipment at elementary schools that is designed to be used by children with varying levels of mobility so that everyone has a chance to play. Halcyon's new 15,000 square foot building was intentionally designed with trauma-informed features to meet the needs of the program and create a comfortable space for the children. We have strengthened security across the district by enhancing control and monitoring activity in our buildings and enhancing our ability to communicate with each other and emergency agencies. We are so grateful to our community, our taxpayers, and the district for their visionary leadership that connected innovative learning environments to teaching and learning that prepares students for modern postgraduate success. We couldn't be more proud of the work that we accomplished with the innovation funds that were allocated in the bond. The educational innovation component of the Building for Student Success program is a great example of what can be achieved when a community supports their educators with the financial resources to do more with more. Approximately 28% of the program funding was directed at rethinking and implementing new approaches to designing learning environments. These investments benefited all schools and students. A portion of each school's bond project was allocated for making renovations to learning environments to support innovative approaches to teaching and learning. In addition, the reconstruction of 3 schools and the new construction of Metal Art created the opportunity to build innovative learning environments from the ground up. We began our innovation work in the summer of 2015 by creating our innovation guiding principles. These were our North Star during design. They reminded us what our aspirations were for learning and then design space to meet those needs. Professional learning was provided for staff in order to pair innovative teaching and learning with their new innovative learning environments. It is exciting to see how our educators created spaces to foster these ideas about what we wanted learning to look like. We're going to talk a little bit about some examples of how those principles drove the learning spaces. One of the innovation guiding principles was learning is founded in inquiry. Because research and critical thinking often happened in our school libraries, that goal for learning guided many of the designs and redesigns of those spaces across the district. Libraries across the district have been modernized, and some have been given a new name to reflect this new purpose. Curiosity centers are welcoming spaces that invite students to explore their curiosities through researching and sharing what they find with their peers. Although these areas certainly have books for students, many of them are equipped with many other kinds of 21st century learning tools, such as robotics, Chromebooks, and digital recording equipment. Another one of our innovation guiding principles was learning fosters a culture of curiosity and risk-taking. Many of our schools created innovation labs, sometimes attached to or as part of the library renovation, or occasionally as standalone rooms. These spaces are stocked with tools and equipment that allow students to build and create in order to apply academic knowledge in relevant and authentic ways. They leverage real-world processes such as design thinking alongside of knowledge of science, math, and technology solutions to engineer creative solutions to real-world problems. These are spaces full of students learning academic content in order to apply it to a high level of thinking. For example, some of the innovation labs are high-tech video production studios where students engage in writing, editing, and communication skills, all key language, arts, and humanities skills to create news, broadcasts, movies, documentaries, and podcasts. Communication and collaboration are essential skills in the modern work environment and are captured in the innovation guiding principle, learning is a social process. The design of our new buildings and a number of our renovation projects sought ways to create spaces that would foster students' ability to collaborate and share their learning in groups of 2 to 20 or more. The furniture in the spaces is mobile and can be easily arranged to accommodate a variety of learning needs. They are equipped with different kinds of seating that allow for different sizes of student groups to work together. Another key aspect of our collaboration safe spaces are surfaces and tools that allow students to share their thinking by making it visible. This is accomplished through writable surfaces, so we have whiteboards on the walls, we have writable tables, and also through digital displays that allow students to easily project their work from their Chromebooks. These projects all give us the opportunity to rethink how we might reclaim spaces like hallways. A grouping of furniture in a wide corridor or a corner can create a small collaboration space or a quiet nook for students who want to work independently. Creative features like these better utilize spaces throughout the day. We can definitely see the same innovation principle as learning as a social process that was used to guide our design of collaborative spaces present in our newly updated cafeterias. Nearly all students benefit from these renovations, and the upgrades make the spaces more useful throughout the day. Traditionally, most school cafeterias were designed with large rectangular tables, had the small seats. These tables were lined up in rows. Students mainly used the cafeteria space only during the lunch period. Our new spaces, sometimes called the Heart, are used for more comfortable social lunchtime experience. They're also leveraged throughout the day for other purposes. These welcoming spaces are equipped with comfortable furniture that allows students to learn together or find spaces to independently work or study. They are also excellent spaces for community events and presentations in the evenings, and many times connect to outdoor spaces for specialized learning. The Building for Student Success Bond gave us the resources to support changing learning environments to better meet the needs of our teachers, students, and our community. An example of this shift can be seen in the use of learning communities in our schools. This is a significant departure from the egg carton models that we see in our traditional schools. Built to support many different kinds of learning, these schools have a variety of spaces that can be used for many different teaching and learning needs. These spaces in these buildings are flexible spaces, can be made larger or smaller to accommodate different sized groups of students. While there are still classroom type spaces, they are equipped with furniture that is easily moved in order to change the needs of the teachers and learners throughout the day. In the learning community wings of the school, you can see common areas, learning studios, small group rooms, and flex studios. Flex studios also serve as science labs. BVSD has embraced the opportunity to share our work in this area with educators and architects locally, nationally, and internationally. Since planning began, BVSD has hosted and presented at numerous conferences to share our experiences and supported shifting instruction and learning environment paradigms. Educators and architects from Colorado and the nation have visited our schools and learned from our renovation projects and learned from our district experience. BVSD's inclusion of innovation-themed work in the educational facilities master plan has sparked a trend and became a model for local bond measures. It is the support and vision of our community, taxpayers, and district that gave us the opportunity in the 2014 bond program to be influencers in the broader educational community. More importantly, it provided our kids and our teachers with the spaces that inspire teaching and learning. Sustainability was integrated from the beginning of the bond planning process. Sustainability targets and priorities were incorporated into our bond planning documents, articulated to the project teams, and tracked throughout the bond program. Some of the highlights include the installation of 55 EV charging stations at 50 sites. This was supported by a $350,000 grant. All of 4 of our schools were designed to meet 2009 LEED Gold standards. All projects were asked to maximize points for indoor environmental quality. This includes using low-emitting materials such as paints and sealants. We improved ventilation and thermal comfort. We commissioned all projects to make sure the systems were operating as designed, and we increased access to daylighting. We were able to reduce district water use by 10% by using such strategies as low-flow fixtures and landscaping that minimizes water needs. The new Culinary Center allows for more locally sourced food and reduces emissions through shipping and other efficiencies. We were able to create new and enhanced outdoor learning spaces at many of our school sites. Overall, we were able to decrease energy by 24% from our baseline. This also translated to a district reduction in greenhouse gas emissions over the past 5 years. We added new parking for 581 bikes. And finally, 51% of the construction waste was diverted from the landfills. Also, more than 252 tons of furniture and electronics were repurposed and recycled. The generous support of our community has given BVSD the capacity to become a leader on several fronts. Our Board of Education, previous boards and you, thank you, had the vision and understood the importance of full-day kindergarten and expanded preschool for all students. Based on the vision, we were already putting the pieces in place to make it happen when state-approved funding. Our work around educational innovation has become a model locally and nationally. The district has hosted and presented at numerous conferences to share our experiences and support shifting instruction and learning environment paradigms. Likewise, BVS is unique in our comprehensive approach to understand and working to improve indoor air quality in our schools. We are one of the first to install EV charging infrastructure across the district to support vehicle electrification. And we continue to move towards our commitment to be climate neutral by 2050. And at this time, I will turn it over to John Stanton, our Citizens Bond Oversight Chair.
Good evening. When the staff asked if I would help do the presentation, I was like, well, I've been doing this for 5 years, and it was stunning to me that it was 5 years. So I'm the one who gets to represent community since the community's not here. And for the last 5 years, I did represent the community. But I do want to remind you, from the very beginning of this bond program, the community has been a cornerstone and involved. And it wasn't just CBOC. Of course, I feel very personal about CBOC because being the outgoing chair, the Capital Improvement Planning Committee started this all off. And so that committee was a cross-section of all of the community, which led to the master plan, which led to the initial assessments of all of our schools. And so from the very beginning, the community was involved. It turned into CBOC, that's Citizens Bond Oversight Committee. We'll go into some more detail later. We did lots of oversight. What does that mean? We looked at a whole lot of numbers. I have to say, personally, I learned a whole lot about asbestos removal and flooring and all kinds of construction things I wouldn't think about, and like where water goes on a piece of property. But we also learned a lot about the schools. And one thing that we did too is that was the big oversight, but every single school, we had a design advisory team. So every team had a group of parents, teachers, administrators, architects, all getting together for that one school. So it was a community involvement. And when it came to big changes, and over the last 8 years, there were some big changes like new schools and big changes in programs like New Vista. We spun up new groups that the community was involved to make big changes. So let's just keep going on this one. There we go. So where did we spend our money? The biggest piece was building improvements. And that's what I'm saying is we learned a whole lot about air conditioning and electrical systems and roofs and windows and lighting. It's pretty amazing how much money was going on just to keep a building going. 23% of new construction. So new schools, I drove by one on the way here. So it's amazing, you just see it, it's a beautiful space. That included I'll just go down the list. Oops, wrong page. Sorry about that. So Douglas is one I was thinking about because that's the one I drive by all the time. Emerald, Creekside, Halcyon, which I'm going to go into in a second, and Meadowlark. We also have the transportation facility, and if you haven't been there, you should go see it. The Culinary Center, the same thing, and obviously the Education Center. But one of the things that we did as a oversight, we didn't just sit in a room and we'd look at spreadsheets. We actually went and toured. We did our meetings in locations. We went into the spaces. So instead of just saying, well, we got new furniture, we went and sat in the furniture. We went and looked at a breakaway wall. We went and looked at the community center. So one of the things that we saw, we really understood what all these layers were. So when it came to fixtures and equipment, we actually got to see it. And again, when we look at it, the professional servers, it all layered together to have a very successful project. Financial oversight. So one of the biggest things CBOC did, a community of 20 members that represented all areas of the district. I personally represented Superior. And when I joined 5 years ago, I didn't know what I was getting into, I'll just be honest. The first meeting, when you walk in there and they hand you a 11 by 17 piece of paper with little tiny word numbers all over it, and there's all the different projects that we're doing, we knew that everybody's going to have, number one, magnifying glass, and number two, we really started getting into the numbers. And CBOC was always an interesting thing, especially for somebody like me who's a finance guy. But it was always the place where tough questions could be asked and answered. So we actually, especially near the end of the project, when we have, fortunately because of the market, because of the well-managed projects, lots of money was left over. So where did we go? The committee came to us and we came to you for recommendations. And I'll have to say, we were batting 1,000. We never had one recommendation that CBOC did that the board turned down. So we took our job very seriously. And what did we end up doing? Well, we completely redid the field house. Spent a lot more money. The biggest one that really became quite a big topic for multiple meetings, as we looked and saw how much money was left, is could we put air conditioning in all the schools? That was a really big one. And one of the more controversial ones that we actually did was the interior cameras. And it was one that we looked around and said, as CBOC, do we recommend that? And there was lots of hard discussions, and we ended up saying yes and making that recommendation. We also did lots of interesting things with Justice High School. That changed scope because of the grant program. Since Taurus had to be redone, lots of things happened in 8 years. Some of it were very political, some of it wasn't, but it was very interesting to be part of that board, and we were able to do lots of things. One of the big things that we did do was we actually had lots of presentations. So Halcyon is a great example of a big change in scope. We weren't planning on building a new building, but in the end, we flipped the budgets and built a new building. And the citizens and the Oversight Committee and the staff all got together, came up with a good plan after multiple meetings to talk through it, and then we came and were able to present to you the final plan. So I have to say, in closing, from a community standpoint, I appreciated the ability and the honor to be the chair of the CBOC. I learned a lot about the district, and I hope that the next program, the community involvement, will also be a cornerstone of the bond.
To say I am proud is an understatement. 7 years and really, really hard work. And none of this would have been possible without a great team. So I can't say thanks enough. We got one project manager here tonight, Gene Tiemanson. We've got a number of other project managers that have been with us the whole time. Tom Blahawk, Charles Zajemski, a number of others that have just provided a lot of time and effort into this to make sure it was successful. So I want to say thanks to them. I want to say thanks to our IT department, to our entire maintenance department, our custodial staff that makes all these projects successful. You'd be amazed how much work we do in the last 7 days of a project to make it come together. And you've probably seen it if you've got kids at one of our schools. So I also want to sincerely thank Susan Cousins. She put all this together with the help of Jake Cody in communications, but I always say that Susan is our most valuable player as it comes to our bond program. She makes us all look good through our communication materials, through the final report, to all the communications that go out to our parents, et cetera. So Susan, I can't thank you enough. And with that, thank you to previous boards, to this board, just for your leadership, for your patience as we've worked through this. Thank you to Dr. Anderson. Thank you to all of our district leaders for your patience as we've worked through these bond projects. I want to say thanks to everyone that has volunteered their time. So our Capital Improvement Planning Committee put a significant amount of work in getting the master plan right. To our Citizens Bond Oversight Committee that spent countless hours, as John just talked about. To our design advisory teams to make sure that we're meeting the promise of the master plan. And none of this is possible without the generous support of our community, so thank them. So with that, I will open it up for questions.
Thank you, Rob. Thank you, everyone, for being here. Thank you, John. Thank you, Jean. Thank you, Susan. I'll open it up for questions. Oh, wait, sorry. Rob gets to go first.
Thank you, Kathy. Am I on? The work that Rob Price and everybody he's thanked and mentioned, just incredible. Board members, as I'm sure you've seen, Communications has put together a great summary document that will make these available. If I remember right, Rob, with all of those projects, all those millions of dollars, and what I believe, tell me if I'm wrong, that after it was all said and done, scoping out all that work, years and years in advance, you're within 1% of budget.
That is correct. Yep.
I've done this a long time. I've worked in a lot of districts. Rob Price has made that look easy. That is not an easy thing to do. His leadership and just the leadership of our entire team, our project managers, our Citizens Bond Oversight Committee, incredible. Our taxpayers got great value out of these dollars. Our facilities are beautiful. Folks come from other places to look at our facilities. They're all envious. So thank you to our taxpayers. Thank you to this board and previous boards for your guidance and leadership. Thanks to Rob, Don Orr, and everybody else who's worked on this. This is just an amazing accomplishment, and just wanted to state that and thank everyone.
Thanks, Rob. Board member questions? Richard?
I don't have a question, I just have a comment, and just want to congratulate you for a job well done and your team. I know it's a team effort, and I've seen all the schools, and they're all beautiful. And just a quick comment, because as you were talking, especially about the innovation centers and all of that, and the open space and everything else, and we just visited Meadowlark, and Meadowlark is busting its seams in terms of growth, and all of that conceptual thinking is probably gone down the tubes because they're using it for classrooms now, but thank you so much for that, and hopefully we'll fix this problem at Meadowlark.
I forgot to thank one person. I should be thanking Scott Stevens. The last 2 or 3 years has been difficult. Scott is no longer with us, but did a tremendous job when he was here. So if he's watching, hopefully he is. Thank you, Scott.
Thanks, Scott.
And he didn't leave until the projects were done, so. Other board members, Lisa?
Yeah, I have a question, but it's just like it's such a small question. It's so narrow in scope that I want to start by saying first, just thank you so much for all of this, which is tremendous work. I still can't get over Justice High and how incredible that is. But my question is, there was a picture on here in one of your slides with an accessible swing, and I know we had several schools that were lacking those before. I'm wondering whether this brings us to a place where all of our elementary schools have at least one of those, or whether we still have schools that don't.
We should have at least one of those at every school. I will say, we still have a lot of work to do for accessibility purposes on our playgrounds. If there's one area we can improve, that is the area we can improve across the district. We've done a great job in this bond, but we still have room for improvement. So, but yes, we should have one accessible swing at all of our schools. But I can ask our team to check on that.
Thank you for answering that question.
Kitty?
Yeah, my questions are kind of tiny too. And first I want to say just bang up job you all did. When I first came on the board in 2017 and we had a meeting and we were talking about New Vista, and already you were saving money from the bond. And you have done that, you and your team have done that consistently, and we were able to get more things from it. So I'm so proud of our district for that. So thank you so much. I'm intrigued about the trauma-informed design. Can you say more about that?
You know, the architect that we brought in, Anderson Masondale Architects, had designed a lot of facilities similar to Halcyon School. So they brought it in. So when they're thinking about it, they're thinking about the types of paint colors they're using. They thought about the separation between elementary and high school students on that campus. They thought about having small nooks for private learning, so independent learning to where you could pull off and have a quiet space. So all of, when you're thinking of how do we design special education programs, et cetera, they brought that with them. But it is, you really have to tour the facility with the architect to understand all of the different aspects of that building and how it relates from a design perspective to that trauma-informed approach.
That's really cool. So my next question is, you said 4 of the buildings were LEED gold. So which one wasn't?
Which probably should have said 5, shouldn't I? I should have said 5.
Okay, so they all are.
We originally, when we set it out and we were building this, we talked about the 4 new schools, but Halcyon was also designed to meet a LEED Gold standard. We don't go after certification just because there's an expense associated with it, so we ask our architects to design and our contractors to construct to those standards, even though we don't go out and get the plaque, et cetera.
Well, that makes sense. And then one more question. With the EV charging stations, does the district make any money on that?
We make enough to offset the cost of electricity.
That's great.
Yep, that's what we're intending to do.
Thank you, that's all.
Nicole?
Thanks for all this work. It was a really big lift, obviously, over the past 7+ years. It feels like because it is such a big lift, there should be some type of celebration of sorts. And I wonder when, I know we've been hearing from some of our community members about getting into facilities, thoughts in mind about having a celebration where community members can see all of this good work firsthand, not just on a screen?
Now that we are allowing parents and volunteers back in our schools, we've been talking about that, doing something this spring. So more to come. You reminded me of that a month or so ago, and we have been discussing that about how can we get some of these schools open back up. So we will make that happen.
I don't have any questions, but I just want to say thank you. This is incredible. I'm new here, but I am just so impressed. One of the things I've been most impressed by, just as a community member, was I feel like we were ahead of the curve with air filtration and our air AC and all these other systems, and I think that really served us well in the pandemic, and I'm so grateful for that. Thank you guys so much for all your hard work.
So, Nicole, I'm hoping that we can do a tour with some of the CBOC members. We haven't done one in a couple of years, and they're not here tonight because they can't come. And having attended many CBOC meetings. I think it would be great if we could invite them to a tour, to a bus tour like we've done in the past. Maybe we can drive our electric bus around on the bus tour. I don't know. I forgot to mention that we got a grant for low emission buses, so maybe we could even drive some of those around if we have enough people that want to do the tour. So I'm looking forward to being able to celebrate, like you said, Nicole, but also to invite the CBOC members because they worked so hard and for so many years without any compensation. And I can tell you that they put pen to paper. They would say, you know, you told me this was going to be $5 and now it's $5.50. Can you explain it? And your team would say, sure, and here's why. It was amazing. And I want people to remember that we did this through a pandemic too, and through supply shortages. And if you've been paying attention, there's been a little bit of cost escalation over the past few years in construction materials and pricing. And so for what Rob said to Rob, that we came in within 1% and we're still able to expand the scope in the way that we did is just truly phenomenal. And I just want to remind our public, if they're listening, that the state gives us no money for facilities. So we really do rely on the generosity of our local community to be able to build this and to be able to keep our facilities in tip-top shape. At the time this passed, it was the biggest bond in all of Colorado history. I think it's no longer the biggest, but for a small district like Boulder, it was pretty phenomenal that our community stood up and stood by us through all of this. So I just think it's truly phenomenal what you've all done, and it's just so encouraging to see Susan and Jean out there. I remember when I would go on tours, and if you want Jean on your project because there was never an issue where he would be rattled. And I think it was Jean who went, when we did the Halcyon, who went door to door to get the community to come out and help celebrate, and was invited for tea and coffee with the neighbors. And I mean, that tells you something after a construction project that the community was still really supportive. So I just think it's been amazing work, and hats off to Scott too, wherever he is in New Mexico. I think he stepped into this partway through and did an amazing job. So I just have like a couple really quick questions for people who aren't familiar with this. So Rob, you mentioned the interior cameras, and I think some people still might be nervous. Can you just explain where they are so that people understand we're still respecting privacy?
Yep.
And kind of where the interior cameras are and what they're doing, and have they, in your opinion, have they been helpful?
Extremely helpful, and we could give you, I think that's a whole nother conversation about how many different instances where they have helped us from a safety and security standpoint. Interior cameras are in common spaces only, so think about secure vestibules and hallways. They're not in classrooms, they're not in restrooms, they're not in gymnasiums. So common spaces, hallways, corridors, stairs, those types of spaces only. Do we have interior cameras? We also only have them at high schools. We have not installed them at elementary schools, middle schools, or our K-8s. Yep.
So, and I think it's important for our public to know we're not using the cameras in classrooms, like you said, to like watch our teachers and see what they're teaching and, you know, the kinds of things that we're hearing these days. So I think it's really helpful to hear that we only have them in the high schools. And it was a pretty controversial issue to actually go forward with those cameras. But what I'm hearing from principals is that it's been really helpful. Because you can actually see in cases of bullying or other kinds of cases what actually happened, and then, you know, try to assess the situation from real-time data as opposed to kind of what people are remembering. So thank you for that. And then I just want to highlight again, because as we think about going forward and what our next steps are, what John identified, he kind of went through it really quickly, was the amount of work that our community put in. So we had SIPSI that started off by helping us with our analysis of what was needed. And that was a lot of work. And then SIPSI worked with experts, and then the DATs were amazing, and then Kiffany leading all of the innovation work. You kind of breezed through that, but every school got to decide what they wanted to do with their innovation dollars, and it looked unique to every school. And so the community, I think, felt really engaged in each of the school processes. So I think the process that you all implemented was amazing. And then, as you said, Rob, hats off to Susan, because she was at every event, coordinated it, made sure people were there on time, made sure they went off seamlessly. She's been amazing, and I really am deeply appreciative of her work. So, and to you, Rob, thank you for everything that you've done. I really look forward to whatever our next steps are, because this, I guess my final question is, did this solve all our facility needs?
I wished I could sit up here today and say it did. But we will have more to come on March 15th when we'll talk about our facility assessment that we just wrapped up. You approved the contract back in August of 2021. So we brought in a third party, completed a facility assessment. They're going to be bringing that forward. We also have needs at New Vista, but that is an unfunded project right now. We have completed schematic design. So we have estimates, and we'll present those or that information to you again next Tuesday. And then we have increased enrollment in East County that we need to talk about. We've talked about bursting at the seams at Meadowlark, so we're going to have to get serious about what we're doing out there in the Erie area. We have a large development, Parkdale, that is very similar to the size of the subdivision around Meadowlark. So,
Thanks for that preview. So more to come next week. Board members, any other questions? Okay, Stacy, I thought didn't have a question, but go ahead, Stacy.
I don't have a question. I just wanted to add my thanks to everybody. This is really incredible work, and watching it happen over the past several years has been amazing. So just wanted to add my thanks.
So I think it's time for one more round of applause from us for everybody out in the audience who did such an amazing job. Thank you.
I want to say one last thing, and Tiffany Lychak was supposed to be here to present. Unfortunately, she couldn't make it, so thank you for hanging in there with me while I talked about our learning environments, but it was really inspired by Tiffany Lychak and Dave Egan. They coordinated all of our innovation efforts at the beginning of the bond, did an amazing job. Right after Tiffany moved into her new role, Stephanie Schroeder came in and led up the innovation work. So I forgot to name them. I just keep thinking of people, but all three of them were just fabulous through this. So thank you, and appreciate this.
And maybe, Rob, when we do the tour, we can include some of them as well so we can tell them thank you. All right, thanks. All right, so the next agenda item, I believe, is the ERP system go live update. I'm going to turn it over to Rob, who I think will then turn it over to Andrew.
Yep, thanks, Kathy. So, board members, we're going to be giving you all an update on where we are with our Infor ERP project. I don't want to take away from Andrew's presentation, but as a reminder to the board, this is one of those projects that has been like 7 years in the making. That we've been thinking about it, that the board had allocated, I believe it was $4 million before I came on board. I think it was in 2017. ERP stands for Enterprise Resource Planning. Andrew's going to get into all the things that it does and some of the timeline and why we've been going through this. We're right around the corner from going live on the first versions of our new ERP. I'm very, very excited. It won't come without hiccups. Right, and so as we know and communicate, we're planning and preparing to make sure that we iron out all the wrinkles in our plan as we start to go live here within the next couple of weeks. I wanted to give the board an update, our community an update. We've been doing really a great job. Maria on Andrew's team has been leading change management, and so very, very excited on where we are. It's been a long road, and with that, I'll turn it over to Andrew.
All right. President Gephardt, members of the board, Dr. Anderson, I'm excited to be here tonight to talk about a pretty dry topic, let's face it. Normally, I'd be up here with the executive team for the ERP, which includes Mike Gradeau's and Bill Setter. They weren't able to make it, so I'm flying solo, but only sort of, because I've brought along Maria Wilson, who's in the audience here. She is our internal project manager, and when we get to the question phase, if there's anything I can't answer, we'll bring Maria up to help with that. All right, so let me start on this journey. The definition, I'm not going to read all these words, but basically think about it are the systems that support human resources, business services, so finances, all of Bill Setter's organization, payroll, keeping our people paid, and procurement, making sure that we can bring into the organization the things that we need. Everything from Chromebooks to buses will be filtered through this particular system. The benefits of us making this change is really to modernize our system, which we originally went live with in 2004. We'll get gains in information quality and security. Certainly information security is a big thing and continues to be, and we all need to make strides to keep our data safe. Employee efficiencies, because the processes are getting redone. Improved responsiveness. This is a modern system, so what we say is multi-tenant in the cloud. Think of like your Gmail. You can get to it anywhere, anytime, any place on any device. This will be very similar for access that way. We'll be eliminating a number of systems. I'll get to that in a minute. We'll be redesigning business processes and improving access to the data within the system. I told you it'd be a little bit dry. All right, so our journey, ERP 2004, that's when we first went live with Infor. We've upgraded it many times since 2004, but yet it still remains the same basic system that it was in 2004. We identified the need to really make this change in 2017, and it was primarily driven because Infor gave us deadlines saying you need to get off of these old systems and get onto our new systems. We evaluated many options. We went through a whole RFP process, of which many of you as board members were a part of. And in the end, we chose Infor, same product we were with before, but this newer version. The kickoffs happened in 2019, but then we delayed because of the pandemic, and it really got going in 2020. So it's been 2 years of hard work to get us to the point of our go live, which will happen on March 28th. So it's just a matter of a couple weeks away at this point. That's why I'm so excited. This is a long journey, okay? Okay, so what will we be replacing? So systems that will go away. AppleTrack, which is how we do hiring, that'll go away a little bit later in the fall. That'll all be incorporated in the new system. What we call Lawson reports. Infor used to be called Lawson before they were bought by Infor. We still call it Lawson reports. Those are going away. My Passport, which is performance management or employee management, that'll also be part of Infor. We scan our historical documents. We have a third-party system called MHC. That's gone or will be gone. Time Clock Plus. So as you've done your school visits, you may have caught wind of just the rumblings in the transition to the new system and basically a new way to clock in and track time. These are things that we have to do by state law. And in all honesty, we're out of compliance, as Mike would say. This will take us into compliance, allowing us all to track time as required. We have a bunch of ad hoc forms that are in the current system. Our budget development process is being upgraded, and in fact, we're using it. Dr. Anderson has us going through a budget request process, and we're putting all that into the new system even today before the big go live.
Aligned to academic return on investment. So
there you go. And then our custom payment request forms, that'll all be gone as well. Most of these forms will be online, both on a mobile phone basis and through web portals. Okay, so what to expect in the timeline? Since December, things have accelerated. So working on it almost 2 years. December really got us into the testing. User acceptance testing started in January. Trainings launched just last month and are continuing all the way through Go Live, and actually they'll be available after Go Live as well online. April will be post Go Live cutover. This is where the bumps that Dr. Anderson mentioned will come to light, and we'll need to work diligently to fix those. There will be bumps. ERP implementations, no matter where you work or what kind of business you're in, it's impossible to predict everything that may go wrong, and so we're ready for that as well. So system integration testing, end user training, and data conversion, these are the last things all happening right now. So what's our status? This slide is more green than yellow, but I'm in front of you saying we're still working things up until that go live on the 28th. So we're 95% complete with getting to the go live date. User acceptance testing, we've completed over 180 tests with 81 people helping us do that. And then the end user training, 37 sessions so far, 47 hours in those sessions, but just in the month from February till the middle of April when the post go live training happens. So lots of work. We're feeling pretty good about the go live date. So training, how are we preparing our staff to make this transition? It first happened with a lot of training for our super users, over 500 hours. So these are the core people that really know the system well. This is professional training from Infor. It's online training as well to supplement that. They have helped train our office managers, our admin assistants, who all had about 10 hours of training so far on the system, or about 108 people impacted that way. And then our principals, administrators, directors had 3.5 hours of training. Actually, that's going on. A number of us are going through that training later this week. And then the 4,000 plus people will have available to on-demand training as needed. Not everybody will need in-depth training, but every employee will be able to change, say, their W-2 form or their 401k contributions, things we have to do literally by writing on a piece of paper right now and handing over to payroll. So change management has been a big part of this, communicating. This graphic on the right-hand side is a one-pager that is hung up in all the schools, in our offices, our break rooms, just as a reminder that this is coming. There's been numerous show and tells of the actual system. Randy has been invaluable with all the written communications that have gone out to numerous groups, keeping them informed. There's meetings that have been happening, of course, as well. And then we have a project website, so if people don't know what they need to know, they may be directed to that website to actually pull information off of it as well. Okay, so what does this look like as we kind of transition? I've talked about the go live. Payroll is one area that will not be shifting on the 28th when we go live. It will still be our current system, and so we anticipate that going live in about a year. So right after go live, there'll be a big effort put into getting ready for the payroll transition. Infor, by the way, just isn't quite ready for K-12 payroll. Their system is up and running in other businesses, but they're still doing some refinements for K-12. Talent science is a part of Infor. This will help our HR organization really ensure people are in the right jobs, ensure that we're helping people find the right jobs. It is using data in a way we've never been able to use it, so that'll be part of an implementation after March. And then, of course, we'll continue to optimize the system as we learn of areas that need optimizing. So my big thank yous here, the core team, these 6 people, James, Lauren, Judy, Chris, Dave, and Amanda represent our entire organization. They are the ones who have been spending 2 years redefining our business processes, making sure we knew of what things needed to change. In addition to that, we've had 4 people dedicated to the change management work, and Justin from Business Services, Katie from HR, Maria and Karin are both from IT, have been leading that effort to make sure people had the information they need prior to go live. And then my last thanks are what we call the super subject matter experts. These are the day-to-day folks who we would go to when we weren't quite sure. Koki, Jamie, Maureen, Christian, Carrie, Susanna, and Mike kind of round out our efforts. So we are on the launch pad. We're fueled, and we're just about ready to take off. And we all know it'll be a little bit bumpy when we go, but it'll all be a lot better once we get there. Happy to take any questions that you may have.
Thanks, Andrew. Board members, Rob, do you have anything before I go to the board?
Just again, very proud of our team. I mean, these are huge, monumental efforts amidst a pandemic, amidst the other things and priorities that everybody who's been working on this have to manage and maintain. So, just want to thank the team, thank the core team, super team. I think they're all super, but yeah, just a lot of really great work. Excited to move forward. When we get on the other side of implementation, we're going to be in a much better position to access data, integrate, will become more efficient, and those are great things for our organization.
Thanks.
So board members, questions? Richard?
No, just thank you again. I think it's something we've been talking about for, what, 2-3 years now?
3-4 years, yeah.
4? 5? Yeah, I don't know, but I remember
17-ish it started.
with Bill and his boss before she left.
Leslie.
Talking about it then. Jeez, it's been a while.
Yeah.
But thanks a lot.
Yeah, you're welcome.
Stacy, do you have anything?
No, just offer my thanks as well.
All right. Great.
Hold on. Lisa, do you have anything? I have a couple questions. So
Okay.
what does this look like to our certified or our classified staff? Are they going to see any difference? Because you said payroll's downstream, I'm just wondering if there's anything that they're going to be seeing different, or what does that look like to them?
Well, it all depends on your job function. I think in a blanket statement, it should be easier to use the system simply because it's accessible on any platform. So, for example, I need to approve certain expenditures, and if I'm tied up in a meeting, I should be able to pull up my phone with the mobile app and do those types of approvals. The people putting in, say, job requests, which could be a classified employee, they'll be using the new system. It's all web-based. And so I think overall, it'll just be an easier go of it once people learn the new system. I think the one change that I mentioned just briefly earlier is time clocking, and now standardizing that and making sure that every employee that needs to track their time on an hourly basis is using the same system. But even that, there's a mobile app for it, and there's actual physical time clocks that we're putting in for food services and for transportation. So I'm pretty confident it'll be better once we all learn the system.
Can you talk a little about your opinion around how this has increased security for us and our data? Because I think that's a big issue. And I won't understand anything you say, but you can just tell us that you believe that it's a lot more secure.
Yeah, I can't talk about that in public, but no, the big thing is that the new system gives us different granularity on who has access to the system. And so, one of our challenges is always, do we have data, whether it's student data, whether it's employee data, who has access? And so when a modern day system like Infor will have that granularity to say, well, this person, this person, this person. We also have gone to great lengths to grant access based on your role. So where it's all manual today, if you're a principal, for example, you'll be granted certain access based upon your job, something that has evaded this organization for a long time.
Do we know what the life cycle is of this?
Great question. I think going to the cloud, just like your Google email, the company constantly updates it, and we don't have to go through these big upgrades any longer because the updates are rolled out consistently as time goes on. And so, I think it would only be if we got to the point where info got too expensive, or there was a new way of doing finance and there was a new tool that would be the catalyst to, really look at doing something different.
I shudder to ask the question, knowing what you've been through in the last couple of years, to think about how much longer it's going to last, but it sounds like it'll be around for a while.
Yeah, it absolutely should. I mean, the current system has lasted 18 years, and so, that's a long go for software. What kind of devices were you all on in 2004? It's like, wow, okay. BlackBerry, yeah, there you go. Windows XP, maybe. Yeah.
Well, thank you, Andrew. This is really
You're welcome.
impressive, everything that you've done, and thanks to your team. I appreciate that you showed pictures of all of your team, because they're, it's just impressive what goes on behind the scenes in our district just to keep the district running. So I really appreciated being able to understand and pass on our acknowledgement to all your team, because it's pretty amazing work. And from what I understand, you've been working like nights and weekends for a really long time.
The core team. And, Maria really gets my applause because she's been keeping this on the rails.
And then my last question is, my understanding is that even though there'll be bumps, we bought, like what you explained to me, is an off-the-shelf, so that makes it a little easier to implement. Not that there won't be bumps, but can you just talk about that really quickly so we have some level of assurance as to what this looks like?
Yes. So the historical way to do software in any organization was either to develop it in-house or buy something and then customize it for your own usage. It turns out that's very expensive because then you have to have developers who are maintaining it. When you go to what is called multi-tenant cloud-based solutions, that means multiple companies are in the same software. And so the software is made so you can configure it for things we need to do, which is pretty simple relative to customization. And then upgrades don't have to go through an arduous task to make sure all your customizations work because they are just part of the core system.
Thanks, that makes sense to me, which is kind of scary. All right. Thanks, Andrew.
You're welcome. Thanks.
Our final information is the legislative update. Rob, do you have anything you want to talk about?
I do. Things are starting to happen. Had a couple things just to update the board on. Board members, you would know, for those in the public, I was able to testify on Senate Bill 69, which is Learning Disruption Effect on Teacher Evaluation, sponsored by Senator Tammy Story. Really a common sense bill that would prohibit the use of academic measures in evaluating performance of licensed personnel during years in which the delivery of instruction is disrupted. Makes a ton of sense. Still under consideration, but we were able to testify on that. I know that Senate Bill 22-127 regarding special education funding has dropped, which from what I read today, and I'm not sure, Kathy, tell me if this has evolved, but it would increase annual appropriation by an additional $40 million to fund students with disabilities. We're waiting on the early childhood bills to drop. Those didn't drop, did they? They dropped end of last week, and so we're reviewing those, and then, so those are some of the big things that are happening right now.
I think the fear is inflation, and I don't think they're going to adjust the inflationary number, but they're going to. My fear is when we get the budget forecast next week, that they'll use the fear of inflation to say they can't buy down the negative factor or the BS factor as much as they want to. I don't know if they're going to use that same rationale to try to cut the funding to special education. For those of you who have not followed special education funding, this starts to try to get us to where we would have been when they first set these numbers completely arbitrarily in 2006, and they never inflated them. So it's to try to make up for the loss of inflation over all those years. But I want people to remember that that number that we started with, just like our base number, was completely made up and backed into, and has really no relationship to the actual cost of providing the supports to our students with disabilities. So while we are very thankful for the money, and it's a step in the right direction, it isn't closing the door on what I think the state needs to do to step up for students with disabilities. So the other thing I would think we should maybe make time for is to talk about ballot measures, because a bunch of ballot measures have dropped that would have a significant impact on public education. The one that would take us to a method of property taxation like Proposition 13 in California, and we all know what it did to California when they passed Proposition 13. There have been something like 8 ballot measures dropped that would do the same kind of thing, that would limit the ability, it would limit the amount you pay in property taxes, and the numbers I'm hearing is somewhere between $300 and $500 million hit to K-12, which we know we would get backfilled, but I think it would come at the expense of just increasing the negative factor. And then the positive is that there's, as I've talked to you all about before, the kind of new Amendment 23, which would double the amount of the withholding of income tax to 0.66, which could bring in about $800 million. And I think there's still some question as to whether or not the way that money is to be spent should be super specific in the statute or whether it should be more general. And I think they're still polling on that. But those ballot measures dropped too. And then I'm hearing that there will be ballot measures on things that have failed at the legislature, like CRT and parental involvement and parental engagement, and the things that we're kind of seeing around the country that didn't make it out of the legislature, but I think they're talking about bringing those forward as a ballot measure. So there's a lot of really interesting ballot measures, and so maybe, Rob, I know that we have a lot of other things to get through, but maybe we can devote a little bit of time to the ballot measures at some point. maybe not even till May, till we have a better sense of what they all look like. But I think it's going to be really important for us to follow those. So I think that's really all I have. Like you said, the preschool bill, I think it has dropped. I heard it was 120 pages, and I'm really disappointed you haven't read it and analyzed it already. So we will, at some point, we'll get through that, and I think there's going to be some serious questions about what that looks like, including whether the district decides to be the lead on it, and there's lots of intricacies in that bill that we're going to have to figure out. But it's exciting, but it's going to be a heavy lift, and I think there's going to be a lot of work to be done to try to improve that bill. So, and then Tammy Story's other teacher evaluation bill is up for testimony on Thursday, and I'm hoping I could sign up, or that we could support her in that bill as well. So we can talk about that more later. So I think that's all, board members. Do you have anything you want to add to the legislative update or questions about what's going forward? All right, thanks. So now we have, are we okay? Do we need a break? A 2-minute break. And I think we are now ready to take on our action items consent grouping. The next grouping on the agenda is action items, including 7.1 personnel items, 7.2 approval of minutes February 22nd, 2022 special meeting, 7.3 approval of minutes February 22nd, 2022 regular meeting, 7.4 acceptance of donation Mesa Elementary, 7.5 approval of a contract to Adelson and Peterson Mountain States LLC, bless you, for renovation of Fairview High School rooms 425 and 426. Remind me not to put a lifesaver in my mouth right before I'm going to read consent agenda. Sorry if I'm slurring my words. Cancellation of March 22nd, 2022 board meeting, 7.7 fiscal year 23 Chromebook purchase, 7.8 lifelong learning enrichment program consulting, professional services contract with Snapology, 7.9 prevention intervention program MOU with mental health partners, 7.10 resolution 22-07 in support of a voter registration awareness week in BVSD high schools, 7.11 grant Justice High student re-engagement Colorado Department of Education, 7.12 grant professional learning mentor program Colorado Department of Education. Are there any items board members would like to pull from the consent grouping? Hearing none, is there a motion to approve the consent agenda?
So moved.
Richard and Kitty? Are there any discussions on anything in the consent agenda? Kitty?
I just want to point out the resolution on the elections and student voting registration. This is so important, and I'm so glad that we're doing it, and that Molly has, taken the lead on contacting the districts to have us do it, because kids who are 17 now but will be 18 by election day can vote in the primary. And actually, if we'd been able to do this 2 weeks ago, 16 and 17-year-olds could have participated in the party caucuses. Not voted, but participated. So I think it's so important that we emphasize participation in the electoral process.
Can I just add a note? I just want to add that if anything that we observed during our visit to Louisville Elementary School a few weeks ago with Joe Nuguse, kids are so hungry and excited about civic engagement, and any kind of opportunity we have like this just really exciting to be part of. So I'm glad we're moving forward.
Anyone else? Rob, to follow up on what Kitty said, do you know a little bit more details about what we're going to be doing that first week of April on the encouraging students to vote? Is it we just posting it in high schools, or is there anything we can be doing to support that effort?
Let me get with our team, and I'll get back to the board on kind of the things we're doing there.
Anyone else? Stacy? Okay. Laura, could you call the roll, please?
Garcia.
Yes.
Gebhardt.
Yes.
Niznik.
Yes.
Rajpal.
Yes.
Sargent. Sweeney Moran. Zis.
Yes.
Motion passes.
Moving on to policy study items. We have one policy being studied this evening, Board Policy BEDB, and I am going to turn it over to Rob, who will turn it over to Kathleen.
Thank you, Kathy. So as we think about the board's policy BEDB, we've made some adjustments based on some of the conversations that we've had in public. This is a first kind of pass at where this could be adjusted. All the adjustments are in red. And I know that there'll be some discussion on some of these topics as the board has signaled that they want to have that conversation. So to get into the specifics, I'll turn it over to Kathleen.
Thank you, Dr. Anderson. We looked at this policy as part of one of our work sessions and discussed a number of issues. One of those issues in particular was making sure that our public comment period, our public participation was pushed as forward into the meeting as we could. So we made a revision to put committee reports after that, and also talked about operationalizing the superintendent's report so that if there's something like a public health update that we know is going to be extremely lengthy, it could be placed as an individual item on the agenda. So the red line that you see on that issue is really just moving the committee reports to after public comment so that we really can run very efficiently through those first several operational procedures. The other red lines are to add reference to the land acknowledgement that the board had talked about. That's something that we will engage with our community to develop the actual language around the land acknowledgement, but that would be a new item as part of the board's agenda. And then the final item that is redlined, this board has had some conversations about the pledge. Based on the conversation and discussion that I heard, I added some language just for discussion, making it clear that participation in the pledge is a constitutionally protected right. We support free speech, and because we don't support compelled speech, it's an opportunity which is similar to what we see in state law for our students, that they're given an opportunity each day to say the pledge, but we want to make sure it's clear that that participation is optional. So this is the first draft of this policy red line for the board's consideration and discussion.
Is that all, Kathleen? I didn't want to cut you off.
That's it.
Okay, thanks. All right, we'll open it up for board comment. Who wants to go first? Lisa?
Sure. Yeah, I want to talk some more about the pledge. We discussed this at our prioritization meeting. I don't think there's any question that it's optional. I think the fact that it's optional is clear, and that part of, well, maybe what I'll do is go back over the comments that I had at our last meeting, and then we can go from there. So I think we should remove the pledge from our meetings. I don't think it's a useful or healthy way to start our meetings. I think when we open our meetings with a shared statement, we're saying that these things, these values, are the core of who we are as a district and of how we see our duties as a board. I don't think the pledge is the best representation of these values. I think it's noteworthy that our local government groups don't have this practice. City council, for example, and county commissioners don't begin this way, and that's certainly not because they're less patriotic than a school board, but because their work focuses on local issues, as does ours, and a federal pledge simply doesn't make a lot of sense. I assume the reason school boards have historically done this is because the suggestion was that teaching nationalism was a core value of public education. That's not how I see my job or our schools. I believe our core values are excellence in education, equity in our approach to our curriculum, our staffing, and our students, and a belief that each student should be treated as an individual, valued for who they are, and given educational and extracurricular opportunities that address and meet their needs and abilities. I think if we're going to start with a shared statement, it's to speak to that. I'll let Richard speak to the concerns around citizenship, which are meaningful, but among other things, it definitely sets a tone that is unwelcoming to our non-citizen families who watch our meetings and are considering participating. A few more things before I turn it over and ask Richard if he would jump in on that. The first is that the mention of God is alienating not only to students whose families don't believe in God, but based on the Judeo-Christian roots, I think it's easy for folks of any belief tradition outside of those to feel pressured and left out. Second, although we make this optional at the school level, apparently we can't go further than that due to state law, my experience is that at the school level it's often coercive from a peer pressure standpoint. While we can't do anything about removing it from schools, I do think by removing the pledge from our meeting, we can help to remove some of that pressure on students who also wish to not participate. Third, when we speak about liberty and justice in the pledge as things that are true, it's dismissive of huge struggles that most of our nation has endured throughout our history and continues to endure every day. I think when we state the aspirational as actual, we belie the work that needs to be done. And finally, and in some ways I think most importantly, Richard and I are already not standing or saying this pledge, so it feels like a very divisive way to start our meetings. We're starting immediately from being on opposing sides of an issue rather than saying something together, working together, standing together. I'd rather have us start our meeting by saying something unifying if we're going to say anything at all.
Thanks, Lisa. Richard?
You said it all, Lisa. The only thing I want to add is that we do have in our district many students that come from different countries that are not citizens of the United States. Some are residents, some are non-residents, some are undocumented. And I know we can't do nothing at the school level, but I question to see how it's being done at the school level. You know, I remember the incident at Angevine. Now that's taken care of, but are there other incidents that happened at the school level? I think if you make it an opportunity to recite the pledge, participation optional, I'm not even sure how that's going to look like or what it would look like. It would be best just not to say it. And I think it would send a strong message to many of our students and many of our families that are not citizens of the United States here. And I also look at, you know, when I hear the pledge, I'm a former military guy. I was in the Navy. I'm not less patriotic because I don't stand up. But what bothers me a little bit about the pledge is this justice for all comment. You know, I hear that and I says, well, where is the justice for all? So it's something that I will continue doing, but it does say a lot, you know, if we all just agree that we're just not going to say it.
Beth?
Yeah, I think that's really well spoken on both your accounts, and I'm generally in favor of the decision to remove the pledges, but I look at it like this. For me, the question would be, what tone are we setting? What kind of intentionality are we putting out there at the beginning of any kind of meeting? And I think this meeting is no different. I would want to have a conversation about what are we replacing the pledge with? How are we centering ourselves in order to have a productive, you know, connected meeting and to do the good work we need to do? So that would be my biggest thought on the topic is, if we do away with the pledge, only in this context, I think this is, I know we're going to make sure this is clear, but we're not talking about the school building. I would want to know, what are we replacing it with? And is that more in alignment with our values as a board and as a school district?
Anyone else? I guess I'll just respond with a couple things. Oh, Stacy, go ahead.
Yeah, I actually don't have a strong feeling one way or the other, but I seem to recall at our prioritization meeting that someone said that they really enjoy saying it, and so and are proud to say it. I don't remember who did that, and so I don't know if we all would be in agreement to get rid of it. And so I just think there should be some discussion because I seem to recall someone saying that. And yes, I think it's important to even reiterate again that this is not about getting rid of it in the classroom. It's in the school buildings, just at our meeting. I think it's interesting that none of the other local elected officials say it. I actually didn't know that until Lisa had said that. So those are just my thoughts.
Kitty?
Yeah, I don't have a real strong opinion one way or the other, but I was just looking up, and Superior, Town Council, and Lafayette both say the pledge. So it's not exactly accurate that nobody around does.
And when it's my turn, I can talk about what other school districts do. Others? Nicole, do you have anything?
No, I was just going to say the opportunity part. If it was an opportunity that was presented, how can we make that feel more cohesive? So could it be played and we can choose to sit? Do we have to stand? Do we have to say it? I feel like when I've been at elementary schools volunteering in the past, it's projected on a loudspeaker, and sometimes kids are just going about their business. It's not. So there's different ways in which I think it could be approached to protect the federal rights to have the opportunity to say it and meet the will of the board.
Anyone else before I jump in for a second?
Can I ask a question?
Sure.
Sorry, it sounds like Nicole is saying that she thinks there's a federally protected right to be able to say the pledge at the beginning of a meeting, and I don't think that's accurate. I think if I'm understanding the conversation, that you're referring to what Kathleen said, and I think Kathleen was talking about people's right to say or not say the pledge when they choose, not a right to say a pledge at the beginning of an official government meeting.
Well, I think it was First Amendment is what we're talking about.
Yeah, I was just trying to clarify that even for students where we've got a state law that says we give them the opportunity, that they've got a protected right not to participate in the pledge, not that we have a federal obligation to do it. So, thank you.
So I don't see this as opposing. I don't feel like if you don't stand up, Lisa, and I do, that somehow that puts us on opposite sides of this. It just, so I struggle with that comment. And I don't see this as ever saying that what we are doing is actualized. I see it as aspirational. And so I struggle with this a little bit. I looked around at some of our neighboring school districts just to get a sense of what's going on, and the ones that I touched base with were Adams 12, who does the pledge, Jeffco does the pledge, St. Vrain does the pledge. Denver did the pledge until the pandemic, and then they replaced it for a while, and they're still not quite sure what they're going to do with some poetry and things during the pandemic. And they've replaced it with something, to your point, Beth, that's student voice. And so once we've moved off the issue of the pledge, I would really like to have a conversation about how we start to infuse students into our board meetings. Now that the pandemic seems to be a little bit in our rearview mirror, because it feels like we're all here for students. I know St. Vrain starts their meetings with some kind of student work. I know that that's challenging in a district our size, but I've looked at some of the agendas from DPS, and they have a student voice that starts every meeting from different kinds of perspectives. So I would like to see us, as we talk about how we do our agenda and how we go forward, if we could have some kind of way to include student voice in what we're doing, and some kind of raising up student voice. So I know this is only on study, and so I'll need to do a little bit of soul searching, because it troubles me to feel like that my wanting to say this makes you feel like we're opposed, and I don't see it that way. I don't feel it that way, but maybe I'm missing something. And like I said, I also feel like it's aspirational, Richard. I don't feel like we're saying we have justice and liberty for all, because we all know that's not true. But, if we can find some way to navigate this so we all come out stronger, I'm open to listening to that as well. So I don't want this to be a divisive issue on the board at all. We have much bigger, well, not bigger, but this is an important issue for us to come to terms with and to figure out how we're going to start our meetings.
I mean, I think it's oppositional in the sense that it feels very othering for me. I don't know if it feels that way for Richard, but it feels that way for me. And if it feels that way for me, I can only imagine the way it feels for folks who, for a variety of reasons, don't feel like this reflects their values in any way, shape, or form, or who aren't citizens sitting through this prior to our meeting. So I think my experience of feeling on the outside of something that isn't meaningful to me, that's meant to be some sort of coming together and starting of a meeting, I can only imagine that that's deeply magnified by folks in our community who've spoken about not caring for that experience. I do want to say on the flip side that I think the idea of replacing it with something around student voice is excellent and an idea I would get behind very easily.
Richard?
Yeah, I agree. I don't know, I'm just thinking back here and I'm trying to remember. I've been around here for a number of years, and when we actually started saying the pledge in public meetings, I can't recall that, whether it's been like since whoever wrote the pledge, that's when it started, okay? And I know it's gone through some iterations, from the original pledge to what it is today. But I feel like we could start a meeting with something different. And I'm looking at even the land acknowledgement. I mean, that would be different. I mean, that would certainly, I would rather have the land acknowledgement than the pledge, frankly. If we were just to say, hey, we're just going to go jump right into the land acknowledgement and let's get on with the business. And later on, if we can bring some students and have them say something, that would be great too. I mean, it just feels strange for me because I know many individuals in our community, they're not citizens, that don't have a pledge. And I know it's aspirational. But is it aspirational for them? I don't know. I don't see it as aspirational for them. As a matter of fact, I think it's something that for many folks that have gone through issues around liberty and justice for all, it just keeps coming up and coming up and coming up and coming up. I think we need to replace it, frankly.
Well, so this is just up for study right now, and I think, like I said, I'll have to do some soul searching, because if we don't do it, then it feels like I'm the other person that's not we have to just figure out if there's a better way to present it, or if there's not a better way to present it, then we agree that there's not. But if there's a way to honor all of these, that's what I think we have to figure out, all of the different feelings, because they're real and they're deep and they're important. And they're the way we center ourselves when we start our meetings. I don't think the land acknowledgement does it, Richard. I don't think that centers us on our values the way. I think it's an important thing to do, don't get me wrong, but I don't think that's the centering issue for us as a school board. I think that's why it's called an acknowledgement. So I think it's going to be important, but I don't think it gets us, at least in my opinion, to where we need to get to. So I don't know what the next steps are. Rob, I would love your input as to how. Are there other comments on this? I think we could bring it back again for study. And I would also love to see if we could come up with some ideas between now and then about what alternatives we could have, alternatives to bringing it forward, alternatives to not doing it. Just a second. And also, if we could talk about how we could start to incorporate student voice into our board meetings. So Kitty and then Lisa.
Yeah, so I've been I don't have a strong opinion over what we do necessarily, but I enjoy saying the pledge, but I think it's because it feels like tradition to me. It's what I grew up doing. And I kind of feel about that the same way I feel about the national anthem, which is really not a very good national anthem. I mean, never mind that it's not very singable, but it's about war. But it stirs my emotions because it's what has always been, and I kind of feel the same way about the pledge. But I don't know how I would decide, whether or not we were going to do it, because I can see both sides of it.
Lisa and then Beth.
Just a couple things. I mean, I want to point out that not feeling like this is an appropriate way to open our meetings isn't saying that there's not other times throughout the course of everybody's day and life and week that this can't be said, right? This isn't the only opportunity that people have to do this. And to your point that you might feel left on the outside, I think what I'm saying is, what can we all agree on, right? And I think there has to be something that we all want to say that is meaningful to all of us. Maybe that's around the mission and values of Boulder Valley School District. Maybe it's around hearing from students rather than speaking together. But there is certainly an enormous amount of things that unite us. We see the bulk of things in very similar ways and have a shared interest that's brought us to this role. And speaking to that is what feels meaningful to me. But the reason I wanted to speak was actually just to maybe push back a little on the idea of bringing this back on study. From my perspective, I think Richard and I have been asking to have this conversation for 2 years, and then finally had it at prioritization and are now bringing it up on study. Our next meeting is mid-April. I would love us to move it to action at that point rather than push again.
Beth?
Yeah, just a quick comment. I feel really encouraged that we're having a conversation that, yeah, there may be a little bit of differing views. For me, this is a conversation about intentionality and how we conduct ourselves in this public role. And that's my only comment. It's just that I'm excited that we're having a conversation about intentionality and deliberateness, and I appreciate the board having it.
And Lisa, while I respect that you don't want it to wait, I just don't believe we've come to any kind of consensus about what we're going to do and what we would replace it with, which I think we would need to put in this policy. And so I would welcome the opportunity. I think it's important. We've said that it's important through our prioritization. It's the first thing we've brought forward from prioritization at our board meeting. And we're not going to lose sight of this forever. I am sure we can continue to bring that along. I just think we need to reach consensus about what it is that we decide to do so that we can include it in the policy and move forward from that. So that's why I'm recommending that, because it gives us a little bit of time to think about if we come up with something, what we would recommend, what that would look like, so that we can put that in for study and for comment and then bring it forward after that. So I'm not suggesting we don't get it done before school's out. I just think we need to have a little bit of time to think about what we want to do. And I'd also like some time for Rob to think about if there's a way to start including student voice and student participation as a regular part of our meetings. So.
And I think, just to add, taking that time is important. I was watching the DAC, last DAC meeting, and Kitty had shared that we were talking about this, and the DAC, some of the DAC members commented that these are two really polarizing issues, and so how are we messaging it to our community? How are we landing in a place that we feel safe about? Things to consider, because that when you shared that, there was an immediate comment. Those are really hard issues, and I think the conversations we're having here represent how our community feels kind of across the spectrum, and honoring where we are, honoring where they are in this conversation is important.
Kathleen, Stacy.
What two issues are polarizing? Is the second one the land acknowledgement? I'm not clear what Nicole was referring to.
It was those two. Maybe polarizing was the wrong word, but it was like those are big, challenging. Maybe polarizing wasn't the right word, but that's how I remember hearing it. So it was those two that you shared at the opening.
I just think process is really important, to your point, Nicole, about how we get to a conclusion on this. And so, that's what I would like to see, but I'm just one person on the board, so I would love to get people's sense about whether we bring this back at our next meeting as a study item, or what people are comfortable with doing. Richard?
So are you asking for us to think about what could substitute it?
Right, this is going to be our policy, and this is up for study. So what kinds of suggestions would we have for making this policy one that's more inclusive and that addresses all the concerns that we've had here. I think we just need a little bit more time to think that through. Stacy, I see your hand up, but I'll finish with Richard and then I'll call on you.
No, I like that. I think we could think of different things that could substitute the pledge, and have it be a little bit more constructive where it wouldn't be polarizing. Sure, I'd be more than happy to think about some way to substitute the pledge. And I'm looking at you, Lisa. Maybe you and I can think about a lot of different ways to substitute the pledge. But yeah, because it would be require, for me, it would require more conversations with a number of other people too. So yeah.
Stacy and then Beth.
I just have a point of order, actually. So when we vote, we'll be voting on the entire policy, correct? And then my next question is, do we have to have the land acknowledgement ready, or is it just the fact that we will have a land acknowledgement?
You probably can't see Rob, but he's responding with his head on that. So I'll call on Rob to answer your question, Stacy.
Sorry, Stacy. So the way that I understand it, right, this is on study because this is a board policy, right? To the extent the board policy goes into really specific detail on any of the items in the agenda format, I don't believe that it does, right? So you could, as a board, give us direction to say, remove the pledge, add student voice, and then we could talk about what that might be. If you wanted to add that specificity into the policy, you could potentially. But I think just to move this conversation forward, the question, what I hear you all contemplating is, do you remove the pledge, and instead of the pledge, do you add something that says student voice, right? To bring the policy back for you to vote on, I don't think we'd have to have the specifics on what that student voice might be, but what you might want to have a conversation on is that, right? Is it the student voice piece? Is that, if we replace the pledge with that, is that the unifying piece that the board is looking for to, given the conversation that you've had? But I don't know that you need the specificity on what that student voice looks like. I think we could talk through that.
That's what I was hoping, Rob, is that we would just have ideas about what we would, because it's pretty generalized, this policy. So we would put a placeholder in there for that. Go ahead, Stacy.
Right, that was my question. I mean, we're not voting necessarily on the pledge in and of itself. We're voting on this entire policy. So since that's the case, I do think that we should take a little more time to figure it all out.
You can't see Kathleen either, but she's nodding. Kathleen, do you have anything you want to add? Okay.
Nope, you're
Sorry,
voting
Stacey,
on the
I'm trying
whole
to give you
policy.
the nonverbal cues in the room. Anybody else? Beth, you had something?
Yeah, it's kind of to Stacy's question about the point of order. I just want to make sure I understand the process that we'd be going through next. Just so, that's my question. What comes next? If we're considering this, what does that look like at the next meeting? Is this coming back? Or kind of can you walk me through the timeline of what would happen next?
Rob?
I was just having a conversation with Kathleen. I think that the perspective for you all to consider, and this is different, right, is we've been meeting just us for a long time, right? As we invite the public back in and others back in, right? Whatever you decide to do impacts those that are in the meeting as well. That's just as a perspective to consider.
So does that impact your sense of timing, or no?
No. I think that, again, this is the board's policy. You're free to act, right? I think that we can move this. We can keep this on study, right? I don't know that I have direction to change the policy, the red line revisions as we've seen. I mean, I think we could maybe create different versions of the policy based on kind of what we've heard, and then you could act upon that. And then the conversation, if I'm following correctly, would be, how would we define what that other piece would be instead of the pledge? I feel like that's where I hear the board is at now, so.
Nicole?
I was just going to say, the other part of this red line is public comment going in front of the committee report, and I like that change.
Agreed. I think that was a good observation from our public, actually, that was saying, I think it was after we had some fairly lengthy public health presentations, which were really informative and necessary, but it meant that people didn't know how to plan around that. So that makes sense. So maybe, Rob, what we could do is come up with a couple, like 2 or 3 versions of this for study. One that would, and to your point, I don't think it needs to have a lot of detail, but, that says student voice, and then we'll figure what that says later. Centering statement instead of the pledge, and we'll figure out what that says later. But just figure out what the overall structure is of the policy for the next study, and then we can figure out details once we agree to the structure. Does that make sense? Lisa, is that okay?
Yeah, I mean, I think I appreciate you saying we'll get this done before the end of the year. It's hard to believe when it's 3 degrees outside, but I think we have 4 regular board meetings left until the end of the year. So that's probably underscoring my sense of urgency. But if we're on the same page that that's definitely the latest this will get done, I think that's fine.
Does that make sense for everybody to kind of have a top line, a couple alternatives that we can look at, and then we can decide when it's on study and then bring it back for action? Okay. All right. Any other comments on policy BEDB? Thanks, everyone. I think this, sorry. Richard?
So it's on study now, and we're talking about when it will come back. So what are we looking at? I mean, just be real concrete with me. What are we looking at in terms of?
Here's the direction that I've heard the board give to me and to Kathleen. Come up with some based on this conversation, come up with a couple of versions of what the policy would look like. Study for one more board meeting, conversation to say, we like this one, then you can put it for action the following meeting, unless something changes the conversation. New information is presented, folks change opinion, what have you. So it would be 2 meetings based on what I'm hearing now. One, we'd give you versions and you'd say, we like this, or take this, do that, whatever. The next meeting we would have, the expectation would be you'd get to that place and then we'd bring it forward for action.
Lisa?
So we've talked about a few different ways this could go, but if folks have additional ideas, the right thing to do would be to submit them to you prior to our next meeting to get that on that list of options.
Well, again, I mean, at the policy level, based on the conversation, there's going to be like maybe 2 or 3 options. If there's things that you want considered, again, I don't want to get into the level of detail on one thing. It feels inconsistent within policy if we don't get into the details on all of the items within the agenda format in the policy. But I think that as we think about the ideas on what student voice could look like, I think that those could be either shared with me or brought publicly. But
yeah, I'm not suggesting bringing in like a full read of what we would do instead, just that there may be things we haven't contemplated here today that are equally good suggestions, and we'd want to make sure that we have a chance to include those.
Absolutely.
And to your point, we will still have work to do once we even pass this policy as to actually what it means when we implement it, right? What the land acknowledgement means, and what is whatever our alternative, if we come on one, what that would mean. And if we want to do something around students, what that would mean. So there'll still be work to be done, but to your point, Rob, we don't need to put that in the policy in any level of detail. And I do want to point out, thank you, Laura, that we all have new name tags, which was something that we brought up during prioritization. And so I really appreciate you getting that done. So we don't always move with lightning speed, but we do get things done sometimes. And so thank you for getting that done for all of us. And I think it'll be important for us to remember that, like on business cards and when we're presenting ourselves, to remember to use our pronouns. So thank you for doing that. I really appreciate it. So anything else, board members, on this policy? Are we comfortable with where we're going? Kathleen and Rob, are you okay? Stacy? Thumbs up? Okay. Thumbs up? I know this wasn't on action, so anyway. Okay. The only other study item tonight is agenda setting. Is there anything board members want to add for agenda setting? Lisa?
I don't know if this needs to be on the agenda, but there were two things I'd brought up during comment tonight. One was lengthening some of our work sessions, and I think, Rob, you said you're going to look into that. But I'd also discussed that I'd really like us to look at this Boulder International Film Festival movie about Boulder and think about ways we can integrate it into our curriculum. I don't know that that needs to be an agenda item, but I'd like to know that there's going to be some way we can follow up on this conversation and talk about what we can do. Maybe it's agenda, maybe it's not.
Okay, we can figure that out, because I also brought up the No Place for Hate. I just think some of those are school-based decisions, and we'll just have to see what Rob thinks about doing some of that.
Yeah, I mean, I agree. Maybe it's about making things accessible, et cetera. I'm just saying I think we should talk about it either with Rob or in a meeting or something, but I don't want that to disappear.
Stacy, do you have anything for agenda setting? Okay, any other board members, agenda setting? So we got a preview of our next board meeting next week. We're going to get a update from Rob Price on the facilities survey and kind of some options for thinking about going forward. I think that's what our work session is in a week. Richard, you look like you wanted to say something? Okay, I didn't want to close out without.
I want to thank Laura for the name tag, okay? However, I want to make sure that somehow our public knows that we have these pronouns, because you can barely see them. Okay, and somehow we need to make sure that we say something at our next board meeting or something like that.
Well, I was hoping, Richard, by bringing it to light tonight, that people will understand that we're moving forward with that. So, but feel free to highlight it at the next meeting if you want to as well.
I will. Thank you.
Lisa?
Do we have that spring break meeting on our calendar, and do we need to do anything to get rid of it?
It was on the consent agenda. We got rid of it.
I did not pay any attention to that. Thank you.
So no, we're not meeting during spring break. So we have one more meeting in March, and then we don't meet again until April 12th. Do I have that right? So there it is, right there. All right. Do we have a motion to adjourn? Oh, Kitty, sorry, a question?
No, yeah, and it's just going back to pronouns. I just looked online, and we don't have our pronouns next to our names on the website, and so it would be good to add it there as well.
Laura's been trying. She's having technical.
Anything else for the good of the order? Is there a motion to adjourn? Beth? Seconded by the right side of the room. We're adjourned.